Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody on our panel, and welcome everyone at home watching us. Thank you for joining us on this important discussion about honesty in education. Our 6 panelists are so knowledgeable about the subjects that we're going to address, and just so glad to have them and grateful to have them here. Jed Derryberry, Aaron Dorsey, Will Goodson, Camille Kendrick, Joanne Stevenson Jenkins, and Pete Stone are our panelists, and my name is Rick Whitmore. I will be the moderator and facilitator. We are going to have an organic conversation, and before we go ahead with that, I'm going to go ahead and put our panelists on the screen so that we can see everybody. Hey, everybody. And we're going to go ahead and have everyone just kind of tell a little bit about themselves, why they're here, and what they hope that we can accomplish today. So, Jed.
I can't believe I did that. I failed in the Zoom world. After all these years of Zooming, I've started off on mute. Sorry, everybody. My name is Jed Derryberry. I am an educator, author, and illustrator that lives here in the upstate of South Carolina. I have been out of the closet for almost 10 years now. And during that 10 years, I have worked really hard to promote equity in the LGBTQ community, specifically LGBTQ educators. And I hope that someone listening tonight will understand the difference between sex and sexuality. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. And I'm going to use children's books to do it. So stay tuned.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jed. Aaron?
Good evening, everyone. This is Aaron Dorsey. I'm a senior policy analyst with the National Education Association, and I currently reside in Baltimore County, Maryland. The work that I do with NEA is around racial justice, school to prison pipeline, restorative justice, as well as providing programming around racial justice, education, and training with our members. What I hope someone would get out of the conversation tonight is a better understanding of what critical race theory is and what it's not, as well as to minimize some of the hysteria around the topic.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Will?
Hey guys, I'm Will Goodwin, and I'm a senior manager in the aviation industry. I am a big proponent of and supporter of education, and I'm here to support our conversation around CRT.
Thank you, Will. And next is Cameo.
Hey everybody, my name is Camille Kendrick. I am chair of the National Education Association Aspiring Educators Program. So what I do is I work full-time with the NEA to support over 45,000 next generation educators all across the country, live and breathe this work and help to advocate for them, but also prepare them to be the best educators that they can be before they set foot in the classroom. So what I am hoping that you all get out of this event tonight is a sense of agency after doing some learning with us tonight in what your part is to move the racial equity conversation forward in your classrooms with our incredible students.
Awesome, thank you so much. And Joanne.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joanne Stevenson Jenkins. I'm coming from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a retired educator. I sit on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Reimagining America Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I work with the Charlotte East Leadership Education Committee, where we are valiantly and bravely fighting to gather the freedom and the integrity back into the school system that is being taken from us. And that's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And to wrap up the 6, Pete.
Thank you. I'm Pete Stone, honored to be on the panel discussion tonight. I'm a teacher, currently teach high school. I teach because I believe every student, every person is a divine miracle beyond comprehension. full of imaginable peace, hope, joy, and love. And what I hope to gather discussion this evening is just a reminder to everyone listening, watching, especially educators, to not be afraid of sharing your truth and the truth. I believe truth is beauty and beauty is truth. I believe the truth sets us free. And I believe we do not need to ignore problems that are quite obvious. In our country, we need to focus on solutions to keep making it live up to all the potential that it has. And that's why I'm very honored to be here and passionate about doing this work to bring about equity and more beauty upon the earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete, and thank you so much, panelists. Again, my name is Rick Whitmore, and I am a high school Spanish teacher. I've been an educator for 18 years. The South Carolina Education Association has given me this opportunity to create these roundtables so that we can have these important discussions and hopefully have thousands of viewers that can learn about different subjects, such as serving our Latinx students, serving our LGBTQ plus students. Those are some of our past roundtables, and today, of course, on honesty in education. I was the top 5 finalist for 2021 in South Carolina, and I have decided several years ago to get off the sidelines and, instead of just saying that I'm not a racist or a bigot, actually participate in helping eliminate racism and bigotry instead of just sitting on the sidelines. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and bring back up the slides, share those with you. Again, just to kind of recap, we'll go right to there. Those are our panelists on your screen. You should see in the comments our tech guy with the South Carolina Education Association, Todd Scholl, should have, and he probably did put a link into the comments. If you want to see these slides yourself and you want to click on these links, you can find out more about our panelists. But just to kind of let you know where we're heading with this discussion, we're going to talk about the purpose and goal of this discussion, and then get right into it with critical race theory. We're going to discuss, basically learn about it. We all hear about it. And when I say that, we typically Google it. We Google things when we want to learn about it. And I went ahead and brought up some results from a Google search. And then we're going to actually learn more about CRT from the experts. And then we're going to move on to Don't Say Gay bill, which is basically talking about bills both in Florida, started there, and now in South Carolina. And we'll have some of our experts on this panel discuss that as well. And I, again, Google, just like our students and the beginning, which is the purpose and goal of this discussion. The purpose of this roundtable is to sift through the distortions, misinterpretations, and misperceptions of critical race theory and Don't Say Gay. The goal of this roundtable is for educators to become more informed about the truth of both issues so that they may better serve their students from a position of strength and through a lens of honesty. All right, so let's go ahead and get right into critical race theory. And I thought maybe we can just kind of, this is the 3rd edition of the Bible, if you will, of critical race theory, written by Richard Delgado and Gene Stefancic. And I was wondering if Joanne or anybody else would like to kind of start us off with just a general overview of your opinion and views of critical race theory.
I'll start. Critical race theory is a movement, it's an intentional study of how laws and practices were based unfairly, constitutional laws and everything else since the beginning of this country, that tipped the scales against African Americans and people of color. It is a law school course. It came out of, and I had the privilege of studying with Derek Bell, but it came out of several people who came into the discipline of helping people who were going to be fighting to save people's lives in the courtrooms examine how laws do not get carried out fairly in our country and the practice of that since the beginning. So I want to say that, and now up to today, so it is a law school course. It's for people in law school. And everybody on this panel knows that you cannot be 5 years old and be in law school unless you are just like the most amazing super kid that's ever been born. And what I want to take it to that is now expanded, starting going from African Americans or enslaved people to now it includes the needs of women, it includes the needs of Muslims, it includes the needs of people who are immigrants, indigenous people. It has gone across the ocean into law schools all over the world where people are looking at how things happen, especially in those countries where there are caste systems. And I just want to end up by saying that it was hijacked for political reasons in the past 4 years to be used to keep our nation from continuing to move ahead in a future that's more truthful. As far as I'm concerned, they grabbed the wrong straw when they pulled critical race theory and started applying it to educational systems.
Thank you, Joanne. If you look on your screen, these are two of the House bills going through the General Assembly of South Carolina. And it looks like, as we know, in Florida, it sort of basically all started, and South Carolina has their own version. So I'm going to just click on here, and then we'll continue the discussion for the first bill. The bills kind of overlap a bit, but I'm going to just click on what's called the Academic Integrity Act, going through the House right now. And if you go down to, see if I can find it there. It's a really small print, I know, so I will read it briefly. Right here, it says, a public school district may not direct or otherwise compel students to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to any of the following tenets. Now, I'm not going to read all of these for you. I wanted to highlight one specific area here and see if I can get that. Let's see it. I have it written down, so I'll just read it. It's in the bill, and there it is. Here it is. Number 7, right here. It says any individual basically shouldn't feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex. So basically, a lot of people interpret that as we don't want our students to be uncomfortable to hear the truth. That's my take on it. So let me get out of that. And I want to go back to our panelists. Maybe Jed or Peter, anyone that wants to chime in on this, on those bills, or that one bill?
Well, I think that we need to make sure that we say this out loud. When they're talking about the discomfort, they don't want the straight, white, Christian evangelical to feel uncomfortable, because the Black folks, the Muslim folks, the LGBTQ folks, the disabled folks, the folks that come from broken families as defined by what is norm, we've been feeling uncomfortable for decades, centuries upon centuries. So if it's comfort they've been concerned about, they're a little bit late to the party. And I saw my friend Joanne nodding her head up there. She knows what I'm saying is the truth. And we can see through their coded language. We know that it's not comfort. It's protecting whiteness. It's protecting their tradition of whiteness. It's protecting their power. And anybody who's in any marginalized community can see that, because we've seen it before. And so none of us should be surprised. I wasn't surprised this came to South Carolina. Anybody who says they were surprised it came to South Carolina doesn't live here and hasn't been paying attention for, I don't know, 400 years.
Right.
So I think that we need to address that language as what the root of it is. I think that's important for us to say.
Thank you. Pete, did you want to chime in at all on that bill?
Aaron has his hand raised on his.
Oh, I'm sorry, Aaron. I apologize. Thank you.
So these bills are not about dealing with children and the comfort of children. Let's be clear. These bills are about dealing with the uncomfortability of adults, white males, or the white community, adults, and challenging the narrative that we have all been socialized in about America. Right, so we have to, it's not about children. Children are being used as scapegoats. White children are being used as scapegoats to maintain a system of oppression, okay, and dishonesty. And so it is, these bills are in response to what we saw in 2020 with the uprising that we saw across the country, dealing with the disparities that we began to see as a result of COVID that was always there. And so it was like pulling a rug back and seeing all of this, these issues of inequities and inequalities. And so it is in response to that and making sure that this narrative about America, you know, that if you work hard, you will be successful, that there are no barriers, we're all equal under the law and so forth and so on. So that is trying to maintain that narrative, and it's using children as a scapegoat to do that. So I just want to be clear that it's not about children.
Amen. Anybody else would like to chime in? Pete?
Yeah, I would like to say the irony of these bills are they undermine the point they're trying to support. They want to make the point that America is a place of equality and equity and unlimited these things. And we're not afraid of the truth. But if that is true, why do we pass a bill that all of a sudden muzzles what can and cannot be discussed in the classroom? And so therefore, it's a bill made out of fear, not a bill made out of love, promoting what it's supposed to. It undermines its own validity in that it restricts truth and freedom. And I think, therefore, it limits what the great American dream could be, and therefore proves the fact that meritocracy cannot be for everyone in America, because we have bills like this put in place. And I think pointed out in this one of the earlier discussions that y'all did, if you look at all the need in education, especially this year, and we rush to the table, legislators rush to the table to get this passed from the House or the Senate, it speaks to why all the other needs are not being addressed. And speaking of the facts coming up in 2020, if you just look at you almost have to try hard not to notice the disparities of schools predominantly Black students, how underfunded they are compared to the schools predominantly white institutions. Mm-hmm. If you look at the fact, I think 15% of all students are Black students, and then you look at the number who are punished unproportionately in the principal's office. Dr. Anderson, I think of South Carolina State, has a great book, Why Are All the Black Kids at the Principal's Office? It's a wonderful book, but it's loaded with statistics. So these are all just facts and statistics. And so I just want to point out, these are the truth that you can present. And if that truth makes someone uncomfortable, Jed's point, that has other people been felt uncomfortable for years in the opposite directions. This is a fearful reaction to what happened in 2020. But I think it cannot last, given the obviousness that it's truth always shines. I have great faith that the truth of these the statistics will speak for themselves. I think that one of our goals was to let educators know they can empower themselves, know the statistics, let the statistics show the disparities. So you don't have to say, this is my opinion that there are inequalities or inequities. You just present the statistics that 13% of the populations make up 40% of the prison population, and tell me how's that even possible if there's not inequality in the country. So let's just get the statistics out there, and they will speak for themselves.
Thank you, Pete. And as you were talking, I was showing the bill, and I just brought up this slide to discuss. Now, we've discussed about that these bills are reactionary. They become wedge issues in our society. Let's delve into what really is. I know we've talked a bit about it. Many of you have already. What is it? So again, it's Google. Let's Google it. And this is what comes up. This is like dictionary.com, right? This is the average person on the street. This is what they see. So a conceptual framework that considers the impact of historical laws and social structures on the present day perpetuation of racial inequality. First used in legal analysis, like Joanne mentioned, and now applied in education, communication studies, and sociology. The education part, I'm not familiar with it being, at least in South Carolina public schools, but we'll get into that. This is long, but this is I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'm just gonna leave it up here for about a minute so you can read on your own. This is an excerpt from Critical Race Theory, the 3rd edition, from the book itself. Okay, I'm going to move on to, again, I'm still Googling, right? This is from the American Bar Association. I'll leave that for you to read. I'll read the last sentence. It acknowledges that the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship on Black Americans and other people of color continue to permeate the social fabric of this nation. And the last thing that I Googled, and this is what I came up with, was from South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace. And this is her take on it. Any curriculum based in Marxist ideology has no place in our kids' schools or with our military. Critical race theory is nothing more than an attempt by the radical left to indoctrinate our children and pit Americans against one another. Our country has more work to do on racial justice, but injecting this poison into our institutions is not it. I am co-sponsoring 2 bills with Congressman Dan Bishop to uphold President Trump's executive order barring federal funds from being used on this effort to undermine the founding of our nation. And she said this about almost a year ago. All right. So that brings us to one, wait a minute. So what is CRT exactly? 2, is it currently taught in South Carolina public schools? And 3, why all the fuss? So who would like to chime in on that? Aaron?
First of all, what is critical race theory? It is a philosophical theory that examines how race has been codified into American law since the inception of this country. So it's a tool on how to examine how laws have been used to perpetuate and maintain inequities, right, amongst that advantage people classified as white and disadvantaged people, BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color. And so when you look at the history, for example, when we look at the 1790 census, right? We just took a census, 2 years ago. It said it only identified white people who were free and white were the only people that can be US citizens. And they were the only people that was counted. Okay, so what does it mean to be a citizen in the country? What are the rights that you get, right? And so that begins to happen all the way through. So we have laws that saying you can only be a citizen, right? But a qualification for being a citizen, you had to be white. And so we began to start seeing when we had the Homestead Act, who was able to benefit from that, right? Citizens. So although we had African people who were considered Africans or enslaved people, they weren't citizens, so they weren't able to benefit for that. And so therefore we began to start seeing the distribution of wealth that is unequitable, right? We have Chinese Americans who are building railroads who were denied access of being a citizen. So they were building railroads, but they could not buy land. They could not vote, right? And so therefore we began to start seeing how how wealth is being distributed and how people classified as non-white are contributing, but they're not reaping any of the benefits, right? And so this continues. We began to start seeing the Social Security Act, right? That people that was founded in the 1930s, but who were able to benefit from Social Security. It was not agricultural workers or it was domestic workers who were predominantly Black, Latinx, or Asians who weren't able to benefit. So therefore they're paying into a system that they cannot benefit from. We began to start seeing the federal government started the housing, giving loans for housing, and we began to start seeing redlining. So redlining was a system that did not allow, the banks weren't providing loans to people of color to live in communities that were predominated by them. We have segregation, so you couldn't get a loan to move into a white neighborhood. And so we began to start seeing how wealth and labor is continuing to perpetuate the inequities. And so critical race theory helps people to understand how this also provides you with the tools to be able to dismantle example, to provide solutions. How we get to that American dream, we have to understand what why is it important? Like I said, it's important that we understand what it is and how we got to this place. Because a lot of times we talk about race and racism, we talk about it from the interpersonal. You call me, you don't like me because I'm Black. I don't like you because you're white. That's racism. But it happens even if we do get along, right? These systems of inequity and inequalities are continuous. And so critical race theory is looking at the laws that perpetuate this. It has nothing to do with whether you're a good person or a bad person, whether you like Black people, don't like Black people, you know, whether we all want to get along and we intermarry and everything else. These systems are in place, and critical race theory help legal experts to examine how did we get here and what are the tools we need to dismantle it. And go ahead.
No, I'm saying, so what I'm hearing is you're basically trying to educate the public on the truth. And then that sounds cliche, but that's what I'm hearing.
But it's not the public. It's legal scholars. So it's an academic discourse. So it's not a discourse that we're having it now, but it's not a discourse that the general public is having. It's usually something that's in the academy. So in a sense, it could be elitist in a sense, because it's something that happens in grad school.
Right, okay.
And so the average person may not be in grad school, right? The average person, the day-to-day person, these are philosophical discussions that the common person may not be having. And that's the reason why people like critical race theory, what is it? Blah, blah, blah. You can have all this hoopla around it because it's not something that the average person is engaging in and having discussions about race and equities and so forth and so on. So it's really at a higher, like I said, it's the academy. And so we know that can be elitist in a sense, to be honest. But they're having these conversations and help and providing resources as well as tools on how we can dismantle some of these inequities and get to that American dream that everyone can have access to and have opportunities without the laws and the institutional policies and barriers. Okay, I'm sorry, I talked a lot.
No, you're great. No, thank you. How about Cameo or Will? Would you like to chime in? No, you're great.
Yeah, for sure. So yes, +1 to all that Aaron said. So yeah, critical race theory is that. It's a theory that's meant to be tested and to be challenged by those that are in law school. We're not asking our students to take something that they are taught in a class and use critical race theory to dive in and test and challenge how that historical event is impacted by race. That's what law students are doing. It's also not a training. It's not a workshop. It's not us coming together to talk about diversity or equity or inclusion. It is just that. It is a theory. Also, I think one of the questions, we already kind of answered it. We are not teaching critical race theory in schools. Hopefully we are not teaching it in South Carolina. I know that is not a thing. I'm actually from Kentucky, so we have some similar legislation that's happening. And we too are not teaching critical race theory to these children in our classrooms. Also, I think it's important to say that why all of the hoopla, I think is what somebody said, right? So history always shows us that whenever we make progress, especially on race, there's always backlash. And that backlash is always a concerted effort to get us to stop having the conversation and to distort views on the conversation that we're actually having. So these attacks are, again, they're in a response to the growing movement of people who want to see and are making change in our country. And the attacks on critical race theory and using the term critical race theory when really the terms that they're attacking and that you'll see in the documents and in the legislation and the conversations that they are having are words like, in their CRT code words, they're words like multiculturalism, racial justice, restorative justice, woke, white supremacy, cultural relevance, cultural awareness. This is what they are attacking. So is to distract and the real problem of the most powerful students have that support us in creating the country that we know that we deserve, and to help us in combating this systemic racism that we all live in and operate within. So
outstanding. Will, and then Joanne, we'll get to you.
Sure. So I will second what Cami and Aaron said. We have to remember that it isn't about education, but it's more about political power and influence. And as Cami said, it's so important, to remember that Black history is American history. And it's important that we teach the truth, and as she said, we want to ensure that we secure ourselves in the future by supporting teaching of the truth, and for, not just lawyers or the corporate world to understand, but we need to break it down to where everyone understands, and that we all have a better understanding of what CRT truly is.
Thank you, Will. Joanne? You get your mic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess what I wanted to say is, and it's going to be the stream of consciousness compared to everybody who said something before me. But, if you take out critical race theory and just put in critical thinking, that seems to be what the real threat is. And that goes back to what Pete said in the beginning and what this whole thing is. And I have presented in several occasions here in Mecklenburg County to both Mecklenburg County Bar Association, and there's a Black Bar Association. That comes from history. So why do I have to go in and talk to lawyers on 2 different occasions? They're all lawyers, you got it? But there's a reason, because Black lawyers weren't allowed to join Mecklenburg County Bar Association. There's 2 medical societies here in Mecklenburg County. Same reason. Well, why did they go and form their own medical society? Because it was against the law to join the white society. Gita Kapoor, in her book To Drink from the Well, which is the story of the racism and how it affected students up at Chapel Hill, has pictures of Black students, the first Black student admitted to the medical school, sitting outside in the hall because he wasn't allowed to sit inside the classroom. And I thought it was interesting, Rick, that you chose to highlight item number 7, where people are not made to feel uncomfortable. Well, can you imagine trying to take notes in a hall because you cannot go into the classroom and sit with people? And so I think if we just want to dumb everybody down, and just take out critical thinking, you can fill in whatever you want to in the middle. You can call it this, gay, right, whatever. And that's what is a threat to education, because our work is to raise thinking, wonderful human beings that are going to contribute to the society the best way they can. Done. Putting myself on.
I just want to say something real quick. I think it's funny what Joanne said. She taught us a lot about history in that little snippet right there. And the majority of the people that are writing these laws are the same ones that scream, "Don't erase history." But they are literally writing into laws the banning of teaching history. I just think that's an interesting point, and we need to keep that in our mind. They're more concerned about a statue than they are the truth. We need to keep that at the forefront of this discussion, because it is vital to the movement.
And just to piggyback on that, it is a narrative that they are trying to maintain, and that narrative does not include marginalized communities. And so I want us to be very clear when we talk about teaching of history and the truth, that is separate from critical race theory. And I think Cameo made that point. And so we cannot confuse the two. And so critical race theory is a theory that examines things, and what these laws are attacking is not critical race theory. And Cameo was very clear on that. And so we need to make sure that people attacking critical race theory. They're attacking teaching of cisgender. That's what these laws are attacking. And so we need to be very, and I want the public who are listening to be very clear on that, and that these laws have nothing to do with critical race theory. If you ask someone one of these people who are promoting these laws, what critical race theory is, they will not be able to answer for you. They will come up with everything else: multiculturalism, racial justice, social justice, restorative justice. They will come with everything else but what critical race theory actually is.
Thank you. That's what I just put up on the screen from Representative Mace. I mean, Marxist ideology. I mean, they're using these buzzwords that's to scare people. What does that have to do with?
Yeah, again, going back to irony, if anything's Marxist ideology, is passing laws from the government that are banning what can and cannot be taught in schools, and what books cannot be in the schools. And you become like the thing that you fear, I guess, might be the case. I think what's so important about these laws are going to hurt everyone, mostly Black students, students of color, students of LGBTQ. They're going to hurt white students in all of America. As you say, Black history is American history. And I think what people need to realize, is when you bring in the things that America has not done right, that have contradicted these other higher ideals, this is the same thing as looking at oneself. I'm as good as the best and as bad as the worst. And I have to be able to have both of these, and pointing out where I've screwed up, where we've screwed up. It's not saying, oh my gosh, I'm worthless human being that doesn't need to exist anymore. It's saying, let me shed anything that is not of my purest self, so I might improve myself. So when you bring the truth forward in that light, it's a win. But I think it's especially important for Black students of color, to point out these barriers that are seemingly hidden that end up being used to gaslight students of color to make them feel inferior in some ways. And just by pointing out these hidden obstacles that are out there and validating that you're not crazy for imagining that these inequities are actually there, it does a world of difference. Along with cultural relevancy, which is going to be hard to teach with this too, students need to see themselves in that curriculum. We need to bring the richness and the greatness. That the story didn't start with slavery. The story of greatness of Black Americans goes back to the richness of all the African countries, and all of that richness needs to be brought in. And these bills are going to make it harder to talk about anything but this boring, limited canon that it's really difficult to believe that Columbus still discovered America and stuff like this. And people start to see through that. And as I think Camille mentioned, this is backlash. It will dissipate and the truth will keep. But this is why we need everybody to keep speaking the truth in greater numbers. Speak it up there. And I want students to know the truth about systemic racism too. It's important to know. And last thing I'll say, I'm sorry for talking so much, but made the point too, I think when we go into schools and we have this expectation of what racism is, people think the Ku Klux Klan is kind of blatant thing. And that's almost easier to deal with. What we're trying to deal with is this kind of chronic issue that's perpetuated for years. And that's the kind of cancer that's dangerous too. The illnesses that are hidden are the things that spread. If you know you got an acute illness, you'll deal with it. But we got to deal with this more hidden form of, and let white students, people know that, look, these are the damages. If you say you want to be racist, look at these ways that you might be unintentionally inflicting harm on people that you say you love and care about, and look at it to enlighten yourself in that way too. So.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you so much. Great to see. This is CRT is obviously something we can spend hours on. Wish we could. I'm going to move on, and we can always go back and address and piggyback on some things that we've already said. But I want to go ahead and move on a little bit about another bill that's going through the House, the General Assembly of South Carolina. And it's nicknamed the Don't Say Gay bill. And I know if you've not lived under a rock or in a cave, most of you that are listening have heard of this before. But again, I did the same thing with this, and I decided to go ahead and do what the average person does and Google it. But gosh, before I do that, I'm going to go back to one slide, and I'm going to click on this. Again, you all have access at home to these slides, so you can always check these documents yourself. But I'm going to go click on this, and this is the bill. Again, like I said earlier, the bills do overlap a bit, but I came across, I wanted to highlight one part here if I can get to there. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm just going to read it if I don't get it right away, because I want to move on with this. There it is. So let's go back to the top. All right, so right here where you see my pointer, in accordance with the following the following discriminatory concepts are inherently discriminatory and violate the rights of individuals in a free and egalitarian society enumerated in the subsection blah, blah, blah. So these are inherently discriminating. And right here, it says the existence of genders and other than male and female and gender fluidity, non-binary pronouns, honorifics, or related speech, unconscious or implicit bias, or the race and sex are social constructs. So this is actually in a South Carolina bill. So let me get out and go back to that. So based on that, let me pause and just see if anyone wants to comment on that first before I move on.
The whole concept that race is not a social construct. You can just look at the United States Census from 1790 up until now, and you will see how racial categories fluctuate in and out. Whereas sometimes you had mulatto and octoroon as an option that people could use, and then certain census years is no longer exist. Some census years you have people listed as Latinx or well, Mexican at the time, and then Mexican became white. Or you have Irish and Eastern Europeans going from being othered, non-white, to now becoming white. And we see Asians being considered white, but then when applying for citizenship, they're not white, they're Asian. And so race fluctuates depending on the social, political climate or geopolitical climate that's going on within the country. Arabs were seen as white up until 9/11, right? And then they became other. So to say that race is not a social construct is not true. It is a social construct. There's no biological stance for race. It doesn't. I mean, so that's not true.
I was just recently reading about that myself. So thank you for adding that. Also, let's look at the existence. So it's inherently discriminatory to acknowledge the existence of genders other than male and female and gender fluidity. And of course, right here, non-binary pronouns, honorifics, or related speech. Jed, did you want to speak to that?
Well, there's so much I want to say, and I don't even know if we even can touch the tip of the iceberg tonight. But when I'm reading so many of those asinine statements that the lawmakers are proposing, I can't help but wonder, are they really that uneducated on some of these topics where they don't even realize that the words they are using are incorrect words? When they say there's only two genders, they're talking about your private parts, and that they think that your private parts determine your gender. Your private part determines your sex. I am not talking about sex, the verb. I'm talking about your sex, the adjective. In English language, we have words that can be different parts of speech. For example, my name could be jump, which would make it a noun, but I also could jump, and it's a verb. There's words that cross over into different parts of speech. So when they say that there's only two genders, they really don't know the history of our entire world. In the very Bible that they use to discredit me as a human before God and before the country as a gay man, there was eunuchs. What gender was a eunuch? It had no parts. Okay. And so they're really just, I can't figure out if they're just misinformed or ignorant or just trying to get a rise out of everybody. I think it's the third one. I really think it's the third one, because they realize that getting a rise out of ignorant people who vote gets them in office with power and money and control. But to the issue at hand with the Don't Say Gay bill, I know everybody has seen that. I know everybody's been talking about it. What these politicians have tried to convince you of is that we educators are actually going into kindergarten, first, second, third grade classrooms and having discussions about sex with students. We are not doing that. I don't know anybody in South Carolina who's doing that. In fact, almost every LGBTQ teacher I know in South Carolina keeps it really close to themselves because they're afraid. In South Carolina, you can still very much be fired for being gay, regardless of what the federal law is. South Carolina is a right to work state. And if they find out that you are gay and they don't like it, then they can make life hard for you and force you out. Or they can find something else they don't like and use that to terminate you. It happens every day. It has happened to me twice since I've been an educator. Once I was fired from a school for being gay, although they like to use the term forcefully resigned. And then I was forced out of another education position because I was an advocate for the LGBT community. I was told point blank, you are ruining the reputation of our institution because of your gay advocacy, based on one post where I called out an evangelical preacher who used to be my preacher, by the way. So it was a little bit of a personal story there. And I was forced out of that job. Luckily for me now, I work mostly independent. I do some adjunct work for institutions here in South Carolina. And one of the courses that I teach is children's literature. And anybody out there who really wants to understand the ban on saying gay, start reading and looking at children's literature, because some of the books they want to ban are books like this. It's called Uncle Bobby's Wedding. What's the first thing that you notice about Uncle Bobby, who's the white guy, and his partner, Jamie? What do you notice about them? Oh, it's the interracial couple. This beautiful book is a great tool for intersectionality. Never in this book one time does it say the word gay. Never, not one time. But it shows Uncle Bobby and the new Uncle Jamie getting married. This book would not be appropriate according to their bill because it shows a gay lifestyle. But let's look at another book over here that I've got. Published in 1974, the beloved characters, the Berenstain Bears. The Berenstain Bears and the new baby. Now, let's lean in close, everybody. Where do babies come from? Pause. I believe they're made through sexual intercourse. We're grown-ups here, right? We can talk about this. This isn't a show for children. They're made through sexual intercourse. There is a male, there is a female. The baby comes along, and the son even says, a new baby? What? Mama Bear, he had noticed Mama Bear's belly had grown round, and that it was harder and harder to sit in her lap. Yes, the baby's coming soon. This is talking about literally a physical act, whether it says it or not. This book is technically okay because it mentions a heteronormative world. It mentions a mother and a father. This one would not be okay because it mentions two men. There's no evidence here of any sexual activity at all in this book. At most, you might see them hold hands. They don't kiss. They don't, maybe they hug at the end. So I guess, that could be considered sexual activity. This right here, you make it a baby, there's sexual activity. Let's talk about another one. Let's talk about two more. This one, Esther the Wonder Pig, is about two gay people who raise a pig. That's it. Just two men who are married and raise a pig. This would be banned in South Carolina. No representation of those gay men raising a pig. That could really turn somebody gay. You don't want to do that. This one right here, Granddad's Camper. This is about two elderly men. One of them has passed away. They were married and they had a camper together. And the little granddaughter helps grandpa number one mourn the death of grandpa number two. This book would be banned. No mention of sexual activity at all. This is sexuality, okay? Sexuality is the way that you express your feelings and talk about your feelings about who that you love. Sex is the physical act that is carried out based on that sexuality. Here's one that was written in 1998, Froggy's First Kiss. You know what it's about? Froggy getting his first kiss, and he is about in the 3rd grade. This book would be allowed in our public schools. So don't tell me you don't want kids exposed to sex and sexuality. I hate to tell everybody out here, but if you're a man and you like women, or you're a woman and you like men, you are heterosexual. I'm a man who likes other men. I am a homosexual. It is sexuality in the way that we talk about that. That is how I identify. You identify as a heterosexual. The thing that they think is going on, that we are talking about the physical act with these children, and it's just not happening. They're scaring you into thinking that, and they're using the children's books that represent my community and treat us as dignified, respected members of the community as very tools against us, rather than taking, if I went through school libraries and we talked about all of the heteronormative books in those libraries, there wouldn't be any books left, because every book has a male and female character almost that works out some sort of heteronormative problem in our schools.
Perfect. Okay.
So to imagine grade is excited about their new teacher. We moved, we're at a new school. I get her teacher's information and she asks me, Mommy, will you do me a favor and email my teacher before school starts and ask them what their pronouns are? 10 years old, 4th grade, okay? So what these are talking about, they're talking about the erasure of people. And what these lawmakers are scared of is that our future is here. Asking their parents to ask their teachers what their pronouns are so they're prepared for the first day of school. That's where our students are. That's where our future is. That's where we're headed. And that's what they're scared of. And this is why we have these bills.
Scared. That's perfect. Will, did you want to say something? I don't know. No.
Oh, so sorry about that. Just enjoying the conversation and thinking, man, an hour wasn't long enough for us to have this conversation. But, you know, again, I have to chime in with everybody. I think it's important to teach the truth. I think as leaders, we need to help teachers with understanding the pressures that they're under pressure, but it's so important that we help them with these tough conversations. You know, I think it's so important for us to also remember to, you know, our language itself matters. And of course, I don't want to do the wrap up because, but it's just so important that we are supportive, that we help to bridge some of these gaps that we are experiencing as educators. And you know, it's important, as Cami said, to communicate early and often. You know, just hearing her story of her 10-year-old daughter, all those things are important. You know, and definitely don't want to steal the wrap up, but just I got to tell you, it's man, I am so amazed by our conversation today and so happy to be a part of it. So I'm over smiling in thought here.
No, thank you. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I just wanted to add, and I teach high school, like I said earlier, but if I were teaching elementary school and I wouldn't be able to talk about my husband, who I've been with for 27 years, and he happens to be Black. So I'm in an interracial marriage myself, and we are in a same-sex marriage, and I would be prevented from putting a picture of my own husband on my desk. I mean, my students ask me, you know, how he is regularly in high school, and totally comfortable with it. Like there's no issue. And like Jed said, has nothing to do with sex. It has everything to do with our relationship and who I am. I mean, and who we are. We are monogamous. This is our first and only marriage. We haven't been divorced. You know, it has nothing to do with pornography, which I saw in the bill, which is right underneath. That was the next line underneath of some of those points I made. I'm like, they're grouping those together. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. So
Rick, I know we're getting close to near the end of the time, but you mentioned something that I wanted to just address. I know teachers right now in the state who have been already told prior to any discussion of this bill, they work for conservative districts where they've already been told to remove pictures of their same-spouse from the class, or same-sex spouse from the classroom. There are districts in South Carolina that have told their LGBTQ teachers that they need to be saved, and so they're forgiven of their sin of homosexuality, and they will be a better teacher. I know a teacher in the Midlands of South Carolina who was called the F word repeatedly by a student. No disciplinary action was taken to that student. I know hundreds of LGBTQ students teachers across the state who are not even open in their community for fear of not only losing their job, but being literally run out of town. So bills like this are only going to push people like us further back into the closet. And for somebody like me who didn't even make it out till I was 35 because of the religious bigotry that I was subjected to, man, that's a terrifying place. I don't want to go back, but these laws are going to do that.
And they are. And I don't want to be known as the token gay teacher at my school. I just want to be a teacher and live my life. And if we teach kids that there's an exception and then there's all this fuss about it, then they think there's something wrong, right? But thank you all so much. I'm going to bring up the slides again, and we're going to, let's see here, not that one right there. Okay, so we're going to go on. There's some quotes I made, and we're going to get right to really quickly. If anyone wants to ask or add, you don't have to. What can we do to get out the truth? What can teachers that are watching this, educators throughout the country and in South Carolina do? Anything? Any quick comments on that? What we can do?
I'd like to say real quickly as a teacher that we have to reimagine how we do our work. We have to hold fast to what we know, and we have to, understand, to do no harm. I was just sitting here thinking that I'm so glad Will is here because he represents, I guess, corporate America. And if these bills get passed, none of these kids are going to be ready for what corporate America is, which is very inclusive. You got it? And also here in Charlotte, I think all this stuff is a distraction because we just had some statistics here in Charlotte that just came out that scare me to death. 13% of the children in Charlotte across all age groups and all demographics are reading at their grade level, only 13%. And African-American students are only reading at 5%. So if we don't change that, forget reading the history books, because if you can't read, you can't read. And I think if somebody comes up with CRT or don't say gay or anything else, they don't want to talk about that reality that we have thrown away 77% of all the kids and 95% of the kids who identify as African American.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. I just wanted to show you the last slide here. If you want to see our 4 previous roundtables, all you have to do is just click on this, and the slides are in the comments section. You can download them and click on this, and it'll take you right to the website with the South Carolina Education Association. And there you are, the previous 4 roundtables about help supporting LGBTQ plus students, becoming an anti-racist, how to become one, how to become an anti-bigot, and better serving our Latinx students were our 4 previous topics. All right, so just feel free to do that. And thank you to everyone on this panel. Pete, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to leave a word of encouragement too, because Todd Show had this on the last one, Shina Jefferson, that parents of students, it's an overwhelming number who are very supportive of teachers and don't think the problems in the schools. And so these bills need to be addressed, they need to be focused on before they get overwhelming. But I think it's important for educators to stay empowered, to realize there is a lot of positive support pushing that direction, certainly the SCEA and others. So don't feel like you're on an island and you're alone. Reach out, ask for help, get help, because believe it or not, there are more people who believe what you believe. And if you just speak up and get that ball rolling, others will say, hey, she did or he did or they did it. So now you'll have more coming. So don't be afraid to keep speaking your truth. There are many out there supporting you.
Thank you, Pete. Yes, we all need to be role models for sure. So much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, those at home watching. And you all have a wonderful, wonderful week and weekend.